Today on Newsgirls, Chuck Todd compares Mamdani to Trump.
Public debate about the direction of the Democratic Party.
Whether Californians will allow a redistricting.
We will be joining you on a very exciting live stream. FBI art agent on the Louvre Heist.
What made this robbery just so advanced?
Very surprised if these jewels had already been destroyed.
A security guard talked to the robbers. And Meta pays for the White House ballroom.
Isn't subject to transparency laws.
Why do you need a roof terrace at the White House? Welcome to Newsgirls. I'm Wren.
And I'm Mabel.
So if you're watching this, you know why we're laughing. Mabel and I are dressed up for Halloween. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween. And let's address the elephant in the room.
Yes. So I'm dressed up like an elephant.
I'm a donkey. And if you put those two things together, you get the American political party system.
Yes. Flawless execution. We are going to try to podcast in these and be serious.
I accidentally ordered like the donkey from Shrek.
And I kind of look like a Teletubby when my trunk is up.
Forgive us.
We have to go on.
Yeah. So today we are so excited to have on a journalism icon really to break down the elections that are happening next week. So we are having on Chuck Todd.
Wow. No, he's a legend. He hosted Meet the Press for almost a decade. He's interviewed presidents like Obama and Trump. He's interviewed foreign leaders, Netanyahu or like Angela Merkel. Kellyanne Conway's like alternative facts. That came from an interview with Chuck Todd.
Oh, wow.
So it was really shocking to the whole industry earlier this year when Chuck announced he was leaving NBC after 18 years.
Yeah, and in his memo that he sent basically to all of NBC when he was leaving, he said that the media had a long way to go in terms of winning back the trust of viewers that it lost in the past few years. And he emphasized that the best way to start working towards doing that was from the bottom up.
And so he launched his own podcast, the Chuck Toddcast.
So good.
He's been a really big inspiration to us.
So today we wanted to talk to him about like these off-year elections that are happening next week because they obviously don't seem as critical as the presidential election or even the midterms next year, but they'll shake up a lot of what's happening within specific cities and states and really help us understand what big political shifts are happening within the country before these bigger elections.
Yeah, there are 180 key elections happening next week.
That's a lot, yeah.
A lot of important decisions. 32 different states are going to the polls.
So without further ado, our interview with Chuck Todd.
Okay, so Chuck, we will be joining you on a very exciting live stream next week. Can you tell them what they can expect when they tune in?
I love election nights. I've been doing them. This will be my first one without NBC. There's a part of me that thinks, oh my God, am I not going to have the data? So we're partnering with Decision Desk HQ, vote counting operation. You guys are going to participate, really sort of help us with New York City. We're going to start at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. And we're going to go until we call California and the referendum and the redistricting referendum, 11 p.m. Eastern. I think there's interesting drama in New York, New Jersey. We've got the Virginia Attorney General's race, which is going to be a nail biter. So these are sort of like for the real political junkies, the off-year elections. But I'm pretty excited about it because these things tend to be foreshadowing.
We are curious, though. This is the first time that you're doing this on your own. How has it been even prepping by yourself versus obviously working with this big network machine?
You know, I had a political unit that I ran, and we'd always have these sort of election books, and we'd have a whole team of people. So I've been trying to develop something similar. I'm not going to sit here and say I think this would have been maybe 5 times harder to do on my own.
So let's start digging into some of the most notable elections that are coming up. Obviously, the mayoral election heard around the country, New York City mayor. It's so crazy what a life of its own this election has taken on. Even my family back in Wisconsin is texting me like,
Wren, my son is a freshman at SMU. He's never cared about New York City mayor. He texted me the other day. He goes, hey, who would you be voting for in this race, Dad? I'm curious.
So why do you think this election specifically has captured the national conversation like this?
Well, I think, look, it's New York City, right? And that's always been there's outsized impact. It's likely the second hardest public-facing elected position in America, right? After the presidency. I think it's, probably California governor would come after that. And then I think you throw in the fact that we're in the middle of this public debate about the direction of the Democratic Party, right? What's the right response to the Trump era? Is it painting in bright colors like Mamdani? Or is it painting in more, frankly, a little bit more blander earth tones, right? I think Mamdani, the easiest part for him is this election. I think the tougher part is going to be governing. And for me, what I'm going to be watching is, can he get over 50%? Do you know that there hasn't been a mayor of New York City get less than 50% since John Lindsay in 1969?
Well, a lot of people have been likening Mamdani's appeal to that of a young Barack Obama, kind of the charisma, the meteoric rise, the likability. You, we know, wrote a book actually about Obama's first campaign. Do you see the similarities?
So I see some of the similarities, but there's some big differences. Obama was seen as this great uniter in a polarized country. Obama was both seen as a moderate outsider to sort of red state Democrats and this progressive hope among blue state Democrats. People saw what they wanted to see in him, and he did a good job talking to both audiences. I think what I've yet to see out of Mamdani is, and I've been curious about how he's closed. I have not seen him attempt to do that, right? Like, how can I do that? How can I sort of say, hey, look, my ideas may be packaged as democratic socialism by the old rules, but here's why they're different. He hasn't figured out how to make that pivot yet. And that's not easy. I think Mamdani's more Trump. He's sort of tapping into something in the base that is bread and butter for swing voters.
I mean, going down the list of the candidates, we're really interested on your thoughts on Curtis Sliwa, because he's still in the race running as a Republican, despite so many politicians literally begging him to drop out. Even Cuomo has said, if Curtis drops out, I automatically win. He's just causing all of this noise. He's splitting the vote. With that being said, do you think that there's any chance that Tuesday doesn't end in a victory for Zoran?
I don't. The hot take that I've been tempted to say, I'll go ahead and go on the record with you guys, and it's not something I expect, but if you told me it happened, it wouldn't totally shock me. What if Sliwa finishes second? Have you seen the ballot? The physical ballot?
Yeah, it's confusing, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So Mamdani is up top, right? Sliwa is right there, right? Go find Cuomo's name on the ballot.
Yeah.
Right? You need a magnifying glass.
Yeah.
People go into the polls and you're like, hey, honey, are we Democrats? Oh, yeah, we vote for the Democrat. And you just pull the lever. Honey, are we Republicans? Yeah, we're Republican. All right, you just pull the lever. I could make an argument that Sliwa, in his own way, might have been a better one-on-one on Mamdani than Cuomo, because Cuomo was so flawed.
Yes. Well, it's been so crazy to see Cuomo's arc, because when he was governor, he was warring with Trump and his whole brand was like standing up to Trump. Right. And now he's trying to court Trump voters, and Trump's biggest backers like Bill Ackman are out literally pretty much campaigning for Cuomo. Like, how do you make sense of that?
Well, this is where I do put a little fault in Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer. You're the two national leaders in the Democratic Party who are both from New York City. What the hell were you guys doing last year when you knew Cuomo was extraordinarily flawed? There were plenty of interesting candidates that they could have stopped Cuomo early, and there is no Mamdani. There's a theory of politics that, you have the 10% on each side that are super voters and they pay a ton of attention. And then there's the 80% in the middle who look at politics like a toilet, meaning they just expect it to work and they only notice it when it doesn't, right?
Yeah.
And that to me is sort of a lot of mayors. You never notice a good mayor, but you really do. You notice a bad mayor.
That has been interesting to see in this election, to see kind of voters balance their priorities, because they want their mayor to serve as the symbolic victory during a turbulent political era. Like, oh, our mayor like stands up to Trump, or our mayor is a supporter of Israel. But obviously the point of the mayor is to ensure public safety and lower taxes and build bridges. So our question is, has the fact that this mayoral race focused so much on national and even, like you said, global politics made it a better race, or is it something that distracts from how to actually run New York City?
The answer is yes to both questions, meaning it's a more interesting race to cover nationally when you can do it through the prism of Israel or do it through the prism of socialism, right? But the fact of the matter is, his success or failure is going to be about whether garbage gets picked up, whether property taxes are going up too quickly, whether rent is affordable, right? I think Trump is right now in a bad place because it looks like he's focused on everything other than lowering the cost of goods to live. Cuomo wants this to be about identity and about national issues. Mamdani won that primary because he made it about local issues.
Do you think the government shutdown will have any effect? Like, is that going to stir up vitriol against like the national government.
The shutdown was going to impact any race. It's Virginia because of all the federal workers. The federal workers of Virginia rarely used to vote in state elections. That used to be the problem in the 80s and 90s for Virginia Democrats, is they couldn't motivate the federal workers, never saw themselves as Virginians. They just simply saw themselves as, citizens of the United States. They just voted in the bigger elections. That's shifted over the last 25 years as just Northern Virginia has grown into its own sort of mega economy.
So obviously everyone is looking at California, which you mentioned. There's a critical ballot measure about whether Californians will allow a redistricting of the current congressional map so they can basically flip Dem seats. What do you think of this? Like, do you agree with the Democrats pushing for this? Do you think it is a smart political tactic, or do you think it's just like a flashy way for Newsom to be perceived as a future presidential candidate?
I look at this a number of ways. Personally, I think this feels like robbing Peter to pay Paul, meaning I understand the short-term desire, but I'm uncomfortable with the idea that if you feel like voters are being disenfranchised in Texas, why is the answer to disenfranchise voters in California? That is a tough principle to defend.
Right.
Especially when you've been the party that's been trying to defend this, right? There's a chunk of voters that I think have been very important to Democratic success in the Trump era when they've had success. If you're going to behave the same way MAGA behaves, you put that voter, that adds tension to that voter. And I don't know how comfortable they'll stay with the Democratic coalition. That said, at least California Democrats are asking voters permission.
Right.
I think that is, I think that's why it's going to pass. Let me ask you this. Is it better to spend $200 million on a ballot prop in California in 2025? Or what if you took that same $200 million and tried to build a successful Democratic coalition in the state of Texas?
I guess it depends on what happens.
I understand the House is, subpoena power is everything. And there's no doubt there are people in the Democratic leadership who believe if they don't win the House, they can't win in 28.
But that's why I'm from California, and that's why the theory is it all just like a Newsom campaign that's starting really early because it makes a bigger splash, obviously, for him and for the Dems in California than creating these coalitions in purple or red states.
I do think that Newsom has his own ambition, and this has helped it. He's polling better than people that have run for president already. And that's only because of his perceived leadership on this issue. Whether it was a plan as to get Gavin into the top tier of presidential candidates, I'm not going to sit here and say it was a plan, but it's worked.
Well, you are such a trove of knowledge. We learned so much from every conversation with you. Before we let you go, we got to do a final promotion. Where can everyone catch the live stream? Can you tease anyone who's going to be on it other than us, obviously?
I was just going to say, I'm going to have you guys. Crystal is going to be a part of it. We're going to have the data experts at Decision Desk HQ. We've got our New Jersey experts, our New York experts. You guys are going to do some stuff on New York in particular.
Yeah.
We got our Virginia experts, got some California folk. We're going to be on my YouTube channel, Decision Desk YouTube channel. I think we can put it on yours. We're going to take advantage of this. How many places can you live stream at the same time? Essentially, we're hoping that this can turn into sort of the home of where the independent election results happen.
So the world has been freaking out ever since $100 million worth of jewels were stolen from the Louvre in broad daylight last week. And there's just something about missing sapphire necklaces and police hunts and heists that everyone loves. So we thought it would be fun to have on a former FBI art crime expert who actually led the case on the largest property crime in American history to break down this crime and investigation.
And the investigation in France is going full tilt. There's over 100 investigators that are helping to recover the jewels and find the suspects. And the investigators actually found digital forensic evidence that a Louvre security guard was in touch with the robbers. So there is some inside job element, and that sensitive information was passed on about the museum's security, which is how they were aware of the breach. And 2 men so far have been arrested. They're both in their 30s, and they were actually both known to police because of prior robberies before this. And they're both from Paris's Seine-Saint-Denis suburb, which is one of the most deprived areas of the city. And one of them was apprehended at Charles de Gaulle Airport, literally trying to board a plane to Algeria. The other one was found at his house, but he was preparing to fly to Mali in West Africa. So luckily they have these two, but no trace of the jewelry so far.
And of course, the idea of like breaking into the Louvre sounds so crazy. It's the world's most visited museum. There's 30,000 people who go every single day. But apparently the Louvre has been broken into multiple times before. And the most infamous time is when someone actually broke in and stole the Mona Lisa in 1911. And that's actually what made the Mona Lisa so famous, which is crazy. I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
It's because there was just nonstop coverage of the fact that this was missing for 2 years. And so then they finally found the guy. And also it was an inside job. It turned out this guy who worked at the museum stole it, and then he was caught trying to sell it in Italy. But good news for the Louvre, they are having a $93 million security overhaul starting next year, because even the head of the Louvre was like, all of our security is super outdated. That's why this happened.
So this is why we really want to speak to the retired FBI art crime agent, Jeffrey Kelly, to get more insight into how these investigations work. And Agent Kelly was actually the lead investigator on the Gardner heist, which was the largest property crime in U.S. history. It was at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. And that was when two men broke in, stole 13 works of art that was valued at $500 million. Agent Kelly even has a book coming out about it called 13 Perfect Fugitives. So let's get into our Louvre conversation.
So, Jeffrey, let's start off talking about the actual crime itself, because we read that the former head of the Paris police said that the robbery showed signs of veteran criminals, which was really interesting to us. Can you break down what made this robbery just so advanced?
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's what we refer to as a smash and grab operation. It's pretty much a simple robbery. Coming in the daylight hours, making forced entry, grabbing items and getting out within a prescribed period of time, in this case under 4 minutes. What made it stand out was obviously the fact it was in downtown Paris and involved the Louvre. And it was kind of sexy that they pulled up in a truck and went up to this ladder, up to the second floor, which made it more advanced than the typical smash and grab operations.
Well, you said that you've seen these museum robberies in daylight all the time. That did surprise us. Is that usual? Is that common?
It certainly happens where somebody goes through the skylight or go through a window or whatnot. But typically when we're talking about modern day age of museum thefts, it really is more the running in, grabbing it, and running back out. We saw that with the Scream in Oslo. And it's a tried and true method, because look, at the end of the day, you're dealing with security guards that are unarmed. It's fairly well known that these security guards are not trained to engage, go hand to hand with these subjects.
Wow, I feel like every heist movie has lied to us, making it seem like it's always in the dead of night.
Hollywood lying? Let's back up here.
And so we know they now have two of the suspects, and it took about a week to catch them. What do you think made it take so long, or is that not long? Do you think that's pretty fast?
No, I think that's fast. When you're talking about art theft, most artwork is recovered either right after the theft occurs, or it's generational. And so this is probably going to be in the former. It's probably going to come back quickly. That's my hope, my guess. From the morning after the robbery, we saw all those investigators, those crime scene technicians in their Tyvek suits, processing the scene. When I heard that they recovered a helmet, and I think perhaps also a glove, that was a huge boon for the investigation, because there's going to be DNA on that. Advancements in DNA technology over the past 10 years have just, it's increased exponentially. And it's going to take a little bit of time to process that DNA and obtain a sample that can be compared.
And what do we know about the guys that they've arrested so far?
It seems like some type of organized crime. And, when we say organized crime, we're not necessarily talking about the mafia. It can be Eastern European organized crime. It can be Asian organized crime. It's organized crime in that it's a group together working towards this robbery, and not like some lone wolf who's out doing it by himself.
We're also obviously, like everyone else, curious about what the thieves have done with the jewels, because it doesn't look like they've been found yet. But these jewels are obviously worth $100 million. Is it possible to even sell them, even if they break the jewels apart, like within that week?
Based on my experience in doing this for so long, there's going to be a cooling off period for this. You would be foolish to break these jewels down immediately and recut the gems and melt down the settings. you'd want to see if you got away with it, because if the French police come knocking on your door to arrest you, or they arrest you at Charles de Gaulle Airport, you need some type of bargaining chip. You need something to be able to offer them in return. There was a huge jewelry theft at the Green Vault in Dresden, like 100 million euros in valuable and culturally historic gems. That happened in 2019 when the subjects were arrested in 2022. 3 years later, they still had those jewels intact, able to give back to get some type of clemency. So I would be very surprised if it turned out that these jewels had already been destroyed and had been broken up into their component parts. There's like 8,000 jewels, I think, total in the 8 items that were stolen. And, that's, even for a skilled jeweler, that's going to take time. And of course, that's going to greatly diminish the value of these stones because you're decreasing their size.
Wow. So it sounds like you feel very optimistic that the jewelry is still in its form that it was stolen in, and that now that especially the police have half of the suspects, you think it's just a matter of time until we get the jewels back?
Yeah, I hope so. Everything is pretty much happening to plan. The French police put a tremendous amount of resources into this immediately. They were exploiting all surveillance video that was in not only the museum, but in the neighborhood and in the whole city of Paris, not just municipal cameras, but privately owned cameras, even Ring cameras. And then, of course, they're going to do what any large-scale investigation is going to require, which is tapping into their informant network, not only in France, but throughout Europe, to see if anybody heard anything.
And we heard that there's now digital forensic evidence that a security guard may have talked to the robbers. Have you heard about this?
I have, and that's also not unusual. About 80% of all museum thefts are insider jobs.
Whoa.
Whether it's somebody actively assisting from inside, or a disgruntled employee, or somebody providing inside information. And when I heard that one of the cameras that was supposed to be pointing at this window had been turned, that makes me wonder, right? Because how did these guys know that they weren't being recorded as they pulled up?
Well, that does bring us to our next question. Like, how much of this huge theft do you think was the fault of the museum security? We know that the head of the Louvre even said that the security system is outdated. We know that the French government is going to put so much money towards like a huge security overhaul. Was this just like going to happen at some point because the security system was so old?
The company that I founded when I retired from the FBI, Argus, that's what we do, is we conduct security assessments for museums and try to identify those deficiencies and help them to bring their museums up to the 21st century. And when you're talking about a museum like the Louvre, which is 300 years old, the building itself is a work of art, right? And that's very difficult when you're having a structure that is so historically important. To try and retrofit it and bring it up to 21st century technology standards is really difficult. And I can tell you from not only my work with Argus, but also the almost 30 years with the FBI and the 20 years on the art crime team, it is a constant battle between museum security directors, because the techniques that a security director would want to implement to ensure that the collection is safe are oftentimes at odds with the mission and the values of the museum, to make it a pleasurable experience for their visitors.
And so we have to ask you about your experience, because we understand you were the lead investigator on the Gardner heist, which obviously a very famous heist.
I'm sorry, what was that again? I forgot. It's what the Gardner. I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Can you tell us about that investigation? What was it like?
So for your viewers who don't know about it, the Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum was robbed on March 18th of 1990 by organized crime subjects. And they basically unveiled the night guards by showing up dressed as police officers and saying that they were responding to a disturbance. And the guard, against protocol, let them in. Perfect example of a security system that was a chain rather than layers. Because once they were in, once they got through that service door, there was nothing to stop them from spending the next hour and a half going through the museum. They realized shortly after doing it, that the robbery was the easy part. It's what do you do with $1 billion worth of stolen property that's the most famous stolen artwork in the world? And the answer is not much. There's no value for it. This is why we've seen the sea change in art and cultural property theft over the last 20 years because of smartphones, right? I mean, you can take your smartphone and you can aim it at a piece of art and it will tell you immediately who painted it, when it was painted, is it stolen? So while it was difficult in 1990 to sell stolen artwork, it's impossible in 2025 stolen artwork.
Our last question, though, for you as someone who's been in this industry for so long, how is investigating art crime and these types of thefts different and unique from other crimes?
Well, I'm going to let you know a secret. It's no different. It's no different. These guys are criminals. We all fall victim of that Hollywood myth of the Thomas Crown affair and Ocean's 11 and all these, these guys rappelling down through skylights. It's definitely Hollywood myth stuff. These guys are criminals, and the techniques that you use to catch them and to recover the stolen property is the same.
So we've all been following the total demolition of the East Wing of the White House. But Mabel, I didn't realize that the construction's going to take years on this ballroom. So Trump will barely get to use it as president.
Yeah, like he's going through all of this trouble. But why? If he only gets it for a couple months, that's what people are estimating.
Yeah. Also, next year's the big 250th anniversary that he's hosting at the White House. So he wants it to be a construction site. Like that's going to be an eyesore.
Yeah, I guess he must be really excited about it or something because it's supposed to be huge. It's nearly double the size of the main White House residence part. Trump says it's supposed to be able to fit like 1,000 people. And we've seen renderings of it. I'm sure everyone has. And it looks very similar to the Mar-a-Lago ballroom.
We also noticed he's adding a roof terrace. Like, it's not a hotel. Why do you need a roof terrace at the White House? Like cocktail hour on the roof? What are you doing? And it's now supposed to cost $300 million to build. And that's up from the original estimate of $200 million. And Trump says he is donating a large part of that.
Yeah, he said that it was funded by, quote, many generous patriots, great American companies, and yours truly.
But here's my conspiracy corner. And I want to just go on record. As soon as I saw the alert about this, I was like, this is for ballroom payments. Remember how he's demanding $230 million from the Justice Department? He said he's owed that because they had done him wrong with those investigations. That is to cover his portion. Like, I just know it because the timing for it to align is happening all right now, that the amount being so specific. And Trump actually made a similar joke about this.
Probably owe me a lot of money, but if I get money from our country, I'll do something nice with it, like give it to charity or give it to the White House while we restore the White House. And we're doing a great job in the White House. As you know, the ballroom is under construction.
And then the rest, whatever Trump isn't covering, is coming from companies. And Fortune compiled a list of the 37 companies who have donated to this ballroom fund. And it's all of the big tech firms that you can imagine: Meta, Apple, Amazon, Google, Palantir, Coinbase, Microsoft, all of them. And ethics experts are asking, is this going to be pay for play? Like, are these companies, because they're funding building a part of the White House, are going to feel indebted and like they can have say over policy issues?
No, it's a fair worry because the White House isn't releasing a list of who's funding or how much money is being given. So this could all be kind of done under the table. And the money that he's raising is also being deposited in this place where you can't really monitor it. It's going to the Trust for the National Mall, which is a nonprofit, tax-exempt entity that isn't subject to transparency laws. So literally, who's he taking the money from? How much? Where's it going? Like, we don't have access to any of that. And it's kind of crazy that this is all happening while the government is shut down. We're all seeing, pictures of this demolition and all of this gold and reconstruction happening while people are struggling financially. People are, furloughed. It kind of, when I was doing research for this, it kind of reminded me of like pre-French Revolution, like, because they were reconstructing Versailles and Marie Antoinette was eating cake and wearing all these clothes and people couldn't afford bread.
For sure giving let them eat cake.
And I feel like he knows that it looks bad because he's wanted to keep it under wraps for a while. Like, last week, his Secret Service blocked off this entryway where journalists were taking pictures because they didn't want those pictures to get leaked. And then apparently Trump ordered federal workers to refrain from taking and sharing photographs with people. So he knows that it looks really bad.
And a lot of people are asking, is this even legal? Like, he didn't get approval for this. A lot of us didn't know that a president can just demolish a whole wing of the White House and there's no repercussions to that. So we looked into it, and apparently construction typically is overseen by a committee called the National Capital Planning Commission, and it's a 12-member agency that's under the executive branch. But Trump has not submitted construction plans to them yet, even though this is already underway. And Trump's justification is that the demolition isn't part of the construction. It's separate, and they only need to oversee the construction.
Well, that's crazy because also Trump appointed the chairman of this committee, and it's actually one of Trump's former personal lawyers. So, of course, he's also saying, well, the demolition isn't a part of the construction. He doesn't need to submit any of the plans.
Well, maybe the current chairman that he appointed is saying that, but former ones have spoken out saying that approval normally does happen before any groundbreaking. Quote, the demolition element is inherent to the overall project. Demo is not separated from construction. It's part of it. Duh.
Yeah, what? You're not going to break it down to just leave it like that?
Yeah. And the concern with this is that then are we just skipping building guidelines, especially historic preservation? This is the White House. This is history. And speaking of that, he's also separately being sued for violating the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 for not consulting with government councils whose whole job it is to oversee historic preservation. There's multiple of them, and he didn't talk to any of them before literally tearing down the entire East Wing of the White House. So even though they violated longstanding tradition, which is going through all of these councils, Trump's team is justifying this by saying they didn't violate any actual laws. And that's something we've seen time and time again from Trump. They don't care what the tradition is or transparency or the usual code of doing things. They're just going to do it.
No, it's true. He isn't following the protocol that presidents before him have followed because he isn't the first one who's done, this reconstruction in the White House. Other presidents have done it as well. But again, they've gone through proper protocol. Historians keep pointing to Harry Truman, who apparently inherited a very crumbling White House. Apparently, the interior was so bad that chandeliers would shake and threaten to fall on the first lady once, and his daughter's piano leg infamously broke through the floor. So it actually needed to be reconstructed. But even so, he worked with the House and Senate. He established a bipartisan committee to oversee the entire project, and it was all to just get $5 million that he had to wait to get approved by Congress. So people go through proper protocol. Just because you're the president doesn't mean you get to skip everything.
Well, right. That makes me question why he's funding it himself. This guy doesn't seem to want to spend money unless he is benefiting from it somehow. So what is he, I keep trying to put myself in his shoes. Has he been embarrassed when world leaders come to the White House and there's not a grand ballroom to show off? Maybe that is at the heart of this. It's just hard to imagine what is motivating this.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. A lot of people are asking the question, why is he doing this? Because like you said, he's only really going to be in the White House for probably a couple months benefiting from this reconstruction. So why go through all of the effort? Especially because during his first term, Trump has infamously called the White House a dump. Even though he denies it, he doesn't seem to love it there. He's staying at his other properties. He's at Mar-a-Lago a lot. So again, why go through this? And there's a lot of theories kind of floating around. Experts in psychology and design have actually weighed in on the conversation and are saying kind of what you're saying, which is that maybe there's a strategy motivating why he wants to rebuild the ballroom, why he's gilding the Oval Office and the cabinet room. There is something potentially to having overwhelming gold and portraits and this grandeur that makes people feel uneasy, especially if politicians are having meetings with him. So that's actually a theory that someone who studies the mental impact of design said.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something to that. And we're not idiots. We know that there's the conspiracies that he's not going to be leaving office after this term, in which case then he would be there to enjoy the ballroom. But we're operating under reality for now until that is tested.
Something else people have really been focusing on within this construction is that in order to make this ballroom, he had to tear down a lot of pre-existing parts of the White House, a lot of areas, a lot of history. And Wren has actually done some extensive reporting on what has to be taken down for this to come up. So want to share with everyone?
Yes. So all of these rooms no longer exist as I go down this list. So first, the office of the First Lady. So every First Lady since Rosalind Carter in 1977 shared or, passed through this East Wing office. But even before that, decades before that, Eleanor Roosevelt was actually the first Lady to use the East Wing as professional space. She would take meetings with different women's groups and activist groups, which I guess is lucky that Melania has only spent 14 days in DC this term because she doesn't have an office. And then the East Colonnade, which is kind of like the walkway that connects the East Wing to the residence, which is supposed to represent the passage from public to private life. And that is one of the corridors that is very famously decorated for the holidays every year. And it was the site of Melania's viral all red quote unquote murder trees from 2018.
Thank God that's gone, honestly.
And then the family theater. I didn't even know there was a theater, but that's so fun, where every presidential family has watched movies since the 1940s. And they also would do private screenings, so celebrities would come and watch their film with the president, or you'd have local kids come in. The gift shop is also gone. That opened in the 1940s, and it sold, maybe this is why Trump wanted to bulldoze it, because it sold only generic White House merch, so it wasn't his MAGA merch. It was just like you can get little White House like figurines and stuff. But we also know from our Zelensky visiting the White House story that Trump has put up like a pop-up gift shop in the West Wing, and he was showing Zelensky his MAGA merch and his like 2028 hats. So he found a way. He found a way. And then finally, the East Wing entrance, which is also where the White House visitor's office is gone, because if you tour the White House, every tour starts in the East Wing entrance, and as of now, tours are canceled indefinitely.
No, that is so sad, because I feel like when we learned about the White House as children, you always think of it as so many separate areas and parts that are kind of working together to keep the White House running. It's sad that so many of these rooms and the theater, I remember learning about that as a kid, like is all gone just to allow this one very lavish ballroom that probably won't be needed that much to just exist.
And originally he said the existing East Wing wouldn't be touched.
Right.
That the ballroom would just go up next to it. What happened to that plan? Because that was a good plan. Then you could have it all, best of both worlds.
Well, I guess in a way we shouldn't really be that surprised that this construction is happening, because this isn't the only thing he's remade in his less than a year back at the White House. We reported on his paving over the Rose Garden that he did a couple months ago. So he paved over the Rose Garden with stone and has these like yellow and white Mar-a-Lago type umbrellas kind of hanging around there. And he's already had a lot of really high profile events there. So he's using that space. And honestly, to me, like the gilding is what has gotten out of hand at the White House.
Everywhere.
It's everywhere. Like we mentioned, the Oval Office, the cabinet room where he has meetings and hosts people. There's gold portraits. There's ornate chandeliers. There's even like gold presidential seals on the ceiling. And then the last thing, you mentioned the East Colonnade, but he's also remade parts of the West Colonnade, which, remember, in September he unveiled the Presidential Walk of Fame, which displays every presidential portrait in like chronological order. And of course, the portrait is framed in gold.
Yes, well, we mentioned that instead of putting up Biden's picture, he put up a picture of his auto pen signature, and that was a big feud, saying that like executive orders Biden signed weren't valid because he signed them via auto pen, which everyone uses. It's like when you go online to sign something, you just like click, put your signature there.
Yeah, glad he got.
It's just very petty.
But all of this just kind of makes you think. I was thinking of like, why does this bother us all so much? Like, what about all of this remodeling sets us off? It's because he's essentially making the White House into his presidential palace, while former presidents have at least pretended to have some sentiment of respect that this is actually the people's house. This isn't like his personal house. He's just living there for 4 years. Like when Obama was asked about what object he liked the most in the Oval Office, he pointed to this rug that was there that was handmade from Michigan, and it had quotes of all these American leaders on them. And he said his favorite quote was from MLK that said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." So there's just this representation of American values and like leaders that's there. But Trump is just now spending a lot of money making a Mar-a-Lago dupe.
Well, thanks for tuning into another episode. Don't forget to watch the Election Night live stream this Tuesday. And don't forget to, of course, like and subscribe to us.
And make sure to tune in next week for a piece on how Atlanta turned old subway cars into an animal sanctuary.
It's so cool. Bye.